I certainly can recommend 5 that I think you should go and see, because if you're a garden lover, they are completely magical. I've been fortunate enough to pretty much travel the entire world visiting gardens of all kinds, and probably seen as many as anybody alive, which actually makes it very difficult to select 5 of the best, because it's difficult to compare apples and pears. But I certainly can recommend 5 that I think, if you get the opportunity to, you should go and see, because if you're a garden lover, they are completely magical. The first garden that I would direct anybody to is here in Britain. It's called Rousham. It's in Oxfordshire, and it was designed in the 1730s by William Kent. And the beauty of Rousham is in its absolute simplicity, as well as its historical import, because it was really the first garden that took the surrounding landscape and included it in. And it's created, not a huge garden, it's created a garden that is based a lot on classical mythology, which of course would have been relevant at the time to people doing the Grand Tour, and is green. There's practically no colour in it at all, but everywhere you go you see glimpses of the countryside around. And what Kent did is he built follies, he built eye catchers. So there's a ruin on a far hillside. It's artificial, but looks like a ruin. He put a new front on a farmhouse across the valley, so you would see that. And it has changed very little since it was made in the 1730s. So as well as being exquisitely beautiful, there is a real sense of stepping back into the 18th century and the very beginnings of what became the landscape movement, which of course was made much more famous by Capability Brown. And I was there the other day, and for about the 6th or 7th time, I first went about 40 years ago, and every time it gets better and better. For my second garden, I think I would go to Italy and a garden called Ninfa, which is halfway between Naples and Rome. And the story of Ninfa is that it was a medieval town with churches and a population, and in fact there was a pope who was crowned, or whatever they do to popes there. He was officially made pope, so it was quite significant and quite important. And then a combination of the plague and also warfare between rival cities meant that the town was abandoned in the 1380s. And it's been owned by the same family since then. And at the beginning of the 20th century, they started to make a garden in amongst the ruins. And when you visit now, you have this garden growing amongst the streets and the churches and the buildings and the halls and the houses of this ruined medieval city. And again, that is just magical, a magical place to visit. I think from Italy, I would suggest taking a hop to Japan and go to Kyoto, which is full of gardens. They tend to be attached to temples, and the temple gardens, they range from various kinds, from tea gardens, dry gardens, stroll gardens, and rather than choose any one garden, I would say spend a day walking around and visiting the temple gardens in Kyoto. Some of them are very small. Some of them are a little larger. None of them are huge, but they are beautifully looked after. They are very much of a kind and of a type, so you immerse yourself in a culture. And it's this combination of Zen and Shinto, which I find fascinating, that is expressed in gardens, whether it be raked gravel gardens or the exquisitely placed, just a few plants, a few mosses, whether it be beautifully pruned trees or shrubs. For a Westerner, used to the sort of rambling borders that we have, it is both a cultural education and also a way of seeing the world and seeing gardens afresh. A garden which I think everybody should visit in France, because it tells you a lot about France and about the French, is Vaux-le-Vicomte. This is a garden which was made by André Lenotre, before Versailles was made. And Versailles was based upon it. The story is that the young Louis XIV visited when he was about 21, 22, and was furious that a garden so splendid had been made, and bankrupted the owner, stole the garden designers and all the designers that were involved in it, and went on to make the gardens at Versailles. But Vaux-le-Vicomte, which is much smaller than Versailles, but also magnificent, survives really as the first really, really great French garden. It was made in the 1640s and 1650s and is an expression of order and rhythm, and that had very early parterres and the use of water and eye lines and symmetry and this grandeur. And of course, on a scale, I say it's smaller than Versailles, everything is smaller than Versailles. It's still big, it's still grand. But you really get from that a sense of 17th century order, when the natural world was fundamentally frightening and wilderness, and what man could impose, if they could contain it and train it, then that was creating order. And you get all that, I think, beautifully done at Vaux-le-Vicomte. Finally, because I think it's stimulating and goes in a direction which has influenced so many people recently, I go to the High Line in New York. Now, this was designed by the Dutch designer, Piet Oldhoff, and has taken the old railway that ran through Manhattan and made this long strip of garden, which subverts really the idea of a garden, because it's up in the air, but it's not a roof garden. It's a walkway, it's used, it's a path, and you look down on the streets below, but it's got trees and it's got planting. And it's the regeneration of what we call sort of brownfield sites that were used, were part of a busy city, and for various reasons have been abandoned and redesigned, recreated, reimagined as a garden that is accessible to anybody and everybody. It's used by the public the whole time. It's beautifully done and just shows what we can and perhaps should do with our cities.